Good evening, everyone. I say good evening with a lot of hesitation because I know there's a lot of turmoil going on in our nation. We have to reconcile as a nation about what is going on. What happened to Mr. George Floyd is something that is not new to the African American community. It is certainly good to see people demonstrate and protest and lift their voices all over this country in solidarity to exposing and helping to ensure after we expose that change actually comes to the United States of America. Hard, heavy lessons that we have to learn. You know, I was thinking about all of the mothers and the fathers and the grandmothers and the sisters and the brothers and how this weighs heavily on our mind. So at Drop the Mic, those of you who have been with us over the course of the last 3 weeks, we know that this is an initiative that Ben Cohen has been working on for a very long time to draw attention to the inordinate amount of money that this country spends on the Pentagon budget. Meanwhile, back at home, back at the ranch, so to speak, we spend scant resources within the discretionary budget. 61% of the discretionary budget goes towards the military industrial complex, thus drop the mic. Where does our money go? We should be concerned about that in all aspects. And so since we're talking about the military industrial complex, it is only fitting that we talk about the militarization of police forces all across this country. So we are going to lend our Drop the Mic platform to drop the mic on this issue that is reverberating, as I said earlier, all over this country. The heaviness, in some cases, the helplessness that people feel. Even folks have talked about feeling a rage about what is going on. It reminds me of something that the great writer James Baldwin once said, and I am paraphrasing him, but he said to be conscious-minded, to be a conscious-minded Black person in America, paraphrasing, is to virtually be in a rage at all times. And so amen to that. Hello, somebody, to that. We are raging. And what happens beyond the demonstrations and the protests is just as important as what people are doing right now, standing up in solidarity for us to determine a new direction in this nation, so that for all of the George Floyds before this happened to George Floyd and what is happening in the moment to people like Breonna Taylor, to people like Christian Cooper, who did not die, thank God, but all of us know, I mean, many of us have seen the video of the woman, I think her name is Amy, weaponizing the police against a Black man. And she did it with such precision as if she had done it before. Not sure if she did, but in her mind. So we're dealing with the psychological impacts of a Eurocentric worldview, of ethnocentrism, as Dr. Eddie Gall lays out in his book, Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves Our Souls. He has a concept called the value gap, which in fact, white lives matter than anybody else's lives. And when you start to distill down to Black lives, we can see generation after generation that requisite respect is not there, that love is not there, that reverence is not there. So we find ourselves repeating this same vicious, troubling cycle over and over again. So nobody should be confused. Nobody should be surprised. The Black community surprised, anybody surprised, because we have to live this every single day, from the types of things that happen to Mr. Floyd all the way to the everyday microaggressions just because of our very existence in this country. We have to stand up and do something about this, and all of us, where we are or what we have, can do something. And speaking of doing something, I have with me one of my favorite people, one of my favorite activists in all the world, Dr. Philip Agnew, one of the co-founders of Dream Defenders, and he has been defending the dream. He certainly has a unique perspective on this because the Dream Defenders were born out of standing up and speaking out boldly and loudly, taking over offices of elected officials when Trayvon Martin was murdered. So we all got a dream to defend. Agnew,
yes,
we're heavy tonight, but we're trying to get on through this.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We are live.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Yes, I was having some technical difficulties. I'm sorry for being late. I'm happy to be here. You know, these are crazy, crazy times as you were talking about, and this is a time when you realize that you need your sisters and your brothers, your family more than any time. So while it's a hard time, I'm really excited to be able to be here with you, SNT. You know, we've put some miles in this country on the road, not nearly as many as you, but you know, I just greatly admire your work, and I'm glad to be here to talk about this crazy moment that we're in, where we go from here.
And certainly I admire your work and all that you do and you stand for, and how you lend your efforts to something that is bigger and greater than yourself. And that's really, if we just imagine if more people would do just that little thing, doesn't take a lot to be able to do something, do what you can where you are with what you have. So let's talk about not just, you know, I was talking to the folks who are joined us tonight, that this is really bigger than what happened to Mr. George Floyd in this moment. This is about all the George and Georgette Floyds before him, all of the Georgette Floyds in this moment, and our effort to try to mitigate, to try to prevent anything else like this from happening. It is a tragedy, not an anomaly, unfortunately, because this is about social, political, economic, environmental, you name it. That is what this is about. So walk us through, share some of your thoughts about this moment, how you are feeling as a young Black man in America, and what you are hearing on the ground.
Yeah, you know, as you mentioned earlier, we got started in 2012 after the murder of Trayvon Martin, and we didn't have a video of that. We had the 911 calls, we had the eyewitness testimony, and then shortly thereafter, we began to start seeing more videos of these things. And once the videos started to come out, believe it or not, I stopped watching them. So I haven't seen the Eric Garner video. I haven't seen, not the full one. I haven't seen the full Tamir Rice video. I haven't watched these videos that have been trafficked and sent around because they began to weigh on me too much. They were too much for me to be able to handle. And I've told this story, but I messed up, and I watched the Ahmaud Arbery video, and I watched the George Floyd video. And I say I messed up because I have been able to keep those things out of me and try to numb a lot of that anger that all of us feel about being in this country and having to live in fear in this country. And so once I watched those videos, I could not sleep. I was angry. I've talked about it before, but I felt a helplessness come over me, that the things we've been doing for all these years, whether it be on the grassroots level, whether it be political or electoral, or now, you know, for a few months, being able to be a part of this presidential experience, that it was all for naught. That if we could do all of that and still not be able to prevent the death and the murder of George Floyd, or really prevent this evil that was in that policeman's eyes, this not caring about this person's humanity, then what were we doing? And, you know, that was the last 2 weeks for me. And I've been able to start to rebuild, and a lot of that excitement and optimism about the future comes from what I'm seeing on the streets, and what I'm experiencing being on the streets is people who are angry and people who want to do something about it. It's people who are plugged in. And as you said, this isn't just about the murder of George Floyd, right? There's been a number of murders of unnamed people, men, women, trans folks, people that we don't even know their names right now. This is about the compounding problems of no food, no shelter, no education, no jobs, no health care, no opportunities. And then you add on all of that, on top of all of that misery, the fact that you are lorded over by police who don't seem to care about you at all, don't care about your life. And that results in this condition that we're in right now. And so I don't think it's going to stop until really people see a real capitulation by these people who are tweeting solidarity and saying that they're in solidarity with people.
Yeah, I agree, Agnew. And it's, while all of those things are nice, especially in the social media age that brings the world closer together, we can communicate with anybody from anywhere. We can show solidarity one to another across the seas, as my grandmother would say. What we need is some
Yep.
real action. And there are some folks who are tweeting and Facebooking and Instagramming who had the power at the time to do something about this stuff, but didn't do anything about it. So this is a time of
Right.
reckoning, especially for those folks who got that special title that the people gave them, as in elected official. What are you going to do with
Right.
that power on the local, regional, state, and federal level? And we don't have to wait for the 2020 November to play out. There are folks with some of the people's power. They can do something right now.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that. And that's another thing that gets you optimistic. We're seeing school boards and universities start to cut ties with the police. And this is stuff that didn't just happen out of the blue. People have been working for this 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And now not despite, because of the protests, because of the uprisings, now we're seeing opportunities available on these campaigns that these elected officials weren't listening to these people before.
Other words, there's promise in the problem. And,
right.
Yeah, we got to leverage this moment. People like our colleague, Michael Render, aka Killer Mike, has really been a force of nature on this issue. Charlemagne the God, another force on this issue. Puff Daddy, another force on this issue. We're seeing more and more, even though for Killer Mike, he certainly has been in the activist mode for a very long time. As he explains to me, he was an activist first and a rapper second. Right. And that is important. But to see so many folks using, especially Black folks, using their platform to leverage this moment to speak a certain truth to power and to open this thing wide, and to declare with the everyday people of this nation, the average people of this nation, Black people of this nation, that we stand with you. And we're, in the words of Mother Fannie Lou Hamer, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's amazing. I think anybody who has something to risk, who takes that risk and steps out and speaks to the conditions of today really honestly and authentically, deserves to have credit for that and deserves to be uplifted for that. I will also say that these are conditions that have been going on for many years. And a lot of these brothers, a lot of those ones that you mentioned, a lot of the ones that we haven't mentioned, but we've seen a lot of these sisters, a lot of these people have been sitting in Calabasas and been sitting in LA and been sitting in these nice neighborhoods on Star Island and haven't been talking about these things, right? And so I'm glad they got here. And I say, welcome, right? But these are the issues that affect people. And I'm interested in what is going to happen when the news cameras go away, because we know that's going to happen. I've experienced it now 5 or 6 times that we had a moment and everybody was paying attention and then everything just went away, right? And so I'm obviously not talking about Killer Mike there. Killer Mike has been there and been standing in the paint. But I think what is required is that people who have not just influence but power are moving into a space that is uncomfortable even for them, right? Right now, because of the protests, we have made the bounds of comfortability wider. You know what I'm saying? Because more people are highlighting it. Now the culture has shifted where if you're not saying anything, you're going to get in trouble for that. But I want to know what's going to happen when there's a new normal, because we know we're not going back to the old normal. And I think that's what is going to be required for us to push this. And we know this. The people who are our opposition do not sleep. They do not rest. And they're waiting for us to do that, for us to sleep, for us to rest, for us to go back inside.
Agreed. I often say that evil never sleeps, so good can never take a vacation. This is a forever proposition here. Yeah. So sign on up for forever. We do have a question, Dr. Agnew, from DeAndre. DeAndre asks, how much do you think white supremacy plays in politics and policies?
Yeah. I mean, it is politics and policy, DeAndre. I think because you asked that question, you know the answer. But I'm not going to humor you because I think it is a serious subject, right? This country was founded on white supremacy. Actually, if I could speak more precisely, it was founded on capital, the exploitation of labor for the benefit of a small group of people. And over time, the conditions began to shift where they had indentured servants who were white, and they had some indentured servants who were black, and they had some black slaves, they had some indigenous slaves. And during those first formative years when this country was founded on money, we want to make money and take money from people's labor, those poor people who were of different races and different ethnicities started to come together and revolt against that small group of people that had money. And so very quickly, they began to create what whiteness is in this country. And so I don't actually want to speak so generally to say that it was founded on white supremacy. It was founded on exploitation of labor and the extraction of labor, and they developed a white supremacy very quickly, very soon. And so to answer your question, white supremacy plays in every bit of our policies and our politics because the people in power are invested in a racial capitalism. The way capitalism works in this country and now around the world is that it is based on the extraction of labor and the division of races, right? And so, we see it in the laws that are passed. We see how they are put forward. We see in the sentencing who gets charged for what. All of those things are a part of it. So white supremacy is bound up in every piece of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, Agnew. I mean, this is certainly not new. And that is a lesson that I really hope that the wider American community takes to heart, that we have been living in these conditions for a very long time. They might not always appear as stark and stunning and shocking as seeing a police officer have his hands in his pockets while he is cutting off the air supply of a black man on the ground, and the cries of the people. He's bleeding through his nose didn't move this man.
Nope.
Nothing moved him.
Nope.
But we experience things that build up to something like that every single day. I remember when I was on CNN, a few months ago, and I was, debating this white woman, and she had the nerve to say that I didn't have any standing. You may remember that interview.
Oh, I remember that. I remember that.
Yes. She said, I ain't had no standing, to quote the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, that is not as stark and insidious and evil as what happened to Mr. Floyd. No, not saying that. But what I am saying, that same mentality that gave her the comfort to fix her lips, to say that to me, is the same comfort that gave Amy in the park, in Central Park, to say to Christian Cooper, I'm calling the police on you. I'm gonna let them know that it's a black man or an African American. I forget what term now, but it was that same ease by which that rolled off of her lips. In other words, what I am saying is not just about people wearing a white sheet all the time. In terms of what is anti-blackness and racism, and how our sisters and brothers in this country instinctively, and it's not just all white people, anybody could be anti-black, but they default to that because it's in their subconscious mind. It's how we have been socialized to see black people as the other. It is in the zeitgeist of this nation. Let's come on, tell the truth about it. You don't even think about it.
Yes, it is. Right.
And she hesitated.
It was the racism, the white supremacy, anti-blackness. These are baked into. This is the air that we breathe, and we don't have to see it to know that it exists, and it keeps America alive. And so that is the unfortunate thing. And I think as we move forward, as we talk about where do we go next, we're not going to be able to legislate racism and hate out of people. But what we need to do is begin to build consequences and repercussions for when something like this happens. We need to be able to have control over the police. We need to be able to defund the police. These are all things that we've got to do, because when an institution has proven itself to be rotten to the core since its inception, then we have to, when somebody shows you who they are, we got to believe them. And the police have consistently, and we know that there are some that are not all like this, but the police as a body, the police forces in this country have consistently shown us that they are anti-black, that their role is to protect property and not to protect black people, poor people, Latino people, trans people. None of those people are on the list.
Yeah, protect property. And not so long ago, when you think about the spectrum of history, our
We
ancestors
were.
were that property. So hello,
Yep.
somebody, wrap your mind around that. And even when we were not that property officially because of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the powers that be. See, that's why this politics matters. So when DeAndre is asking, Agnew, he got me all
Yep.
started. That's why who has the power and they will that power matters. Because even after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, even though our sister Ava broke down 13,
Yeah.
but I'm just
Yeah.
generally speaking in terms of it abolishing slavery, the power brokers still found a way to legally enslave Black folks because of the laws that they wrote. The Black codes determining where we can work, how we can work, when we could work, what types of jobs we could do, the Jim Crow, all of that stuff, the whole notion of de facto and de jure, what is in law and what is in reality, the lives of Black folks.
Yeah. No, you're speaking to it is the form of it may change, the visible form, but the core of it always remains. And they have always been, and by they I mean rich white men, have always been afraid of Black people having self-determination, the ability to determine what their neighborhoods, what their communities, what their lives look like. And that period after slavery of what we call Reconstruction was a huge period that isn't discussed, right, of Black progress in this country, right? The building of not only businesses, but really a society that Black people could be proud of, commitments of land. The reason that this country has free public education is because of that period, because of what Black people did in this country. And so the response to that, right, what white people call redemption, that period of redemption where, like you said, not only Jim Crow was really begun. This was many years before, but this period of re-enslavement of Black people, of convict leasing, of taking Black land away from them that they had over we began to have over the last few decades of Reconstruction. All of that, and it changes form, and it still has remnants today to how the Electoral College is built, right, to how money goes to schools based on areas and zip codes. All of those things are based on really a plantation mentality, which is white supremacist.
It is, and that period that you're speaking of is called the nadir. Historians call it the nadir, the low point for Black history after all that had gone down. But speaking of allies, Agnew, we got a strong ally, as you know, in Ben Cohen, one of the founders of Ben and Jerry's. And I just want to read a portion of the statement that he put out and get you to respond to it. And he said, this is not a Black issue, this is a white issue. Hello, somebody. Just lay that out right at the top in bold letters. And he tells the story about how, he said, one summer when I was in college, I was stopped by the police for smoking pot. I ended up with a ticket for littering. Over the years, I thought about how things could have been different. If I were Black, I probably would have been arrested, thrown into jail, and ended up with a criminal record. I never would have been able to get a bank loan or help from the SBA. The reality is there would never have been a Ben and Jerry's. And I know that if George Floyd's skin color was the same as mine, he'd be alive today. Who has the power in this country? White people, rich people, politicians, and big business. Until the people with the power in America use it to end this affront to our alleged values of fairness, equality, and justice, we will continue to be a nation of hypocrites. Underline, bold, exclamation point. I am a member of some of those powerful groups. It is up to us to change this corrupt system. He who consents, he who is silent consents. Hello, somebody. I mean, Agnew, just do what you want.
No, I mean, and then we've got a little question over here. Being as somebody who I've known for many years, and he's always been a person that in his personal practice has worked to make sure that the benefits and the privilege, frankly, that he's had in the world, that he's redistributed. And it's not, I think every white person in this country has a duty to do more, but that statement right there really speaks to it, right? That the elimination of the way this world works, racist and capitalist and misogynist, really falls on the hands of white people right? To black people historically have been the reason why this country ever contorted itself to live up to the values that it put on papers, on those papers. It has been black people, the blood of black people, but it also has always been historically, and Virginia says we appreciate the history, but we need a plan for our community. I don't know what community that you live in, Virginia, so I can't give you a plan for your community, but I know that we can't develop a plan if we don't know history and we don't have a context for the history, right? That is the concept. That is what is important. If you understand why and how these things were built, you can understand how to unwrap them and how to undo them. There is a plan that has been put forward, kind of to segue a little bit, Senator Turner, to the plan that has been put forward by the Movement for Black Lives. And Virginia, if you want to go to m4bl.org, you can find some of that proposal that has been put forward about how do we end police violence. The number one thing on there is to defund the police and reinvest that money back into our community. We need jobs, food, clothes, healthcare, education. Many of the things that Senator Sanders was talking about on the campaign trail, those things are the basic needs that the movement has been putting forward for many decades. So I would say, just to that question, the plan for your community really comes from your community. I don't think Ella Baker says strong people don't need strong leaders. You have people right there in your community that can come together to design the plan for your community. I'm going to tell you what I believe should be the goals: food, land, housing, shelter, education, healthcare for all people in your community, especially black people, or starting with black people.
Amen. And she also said, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." Hello, somebody. You laid it out, Agnew. It is important for us. It was James Baldwin who said, "Know from whence you came. If you know from whence you came, there's virtually nowhere you cannot go." So we have to understand the deep-seated reasons, because a lot of us think we understand, but we really don't understand. And once we get that understanding, then we determine where to go. So let's talk about some of the, as we wrap this thing up a little bit, to talk about some of the ways in which we can help to ameliorate this problem, both as individuals, but also the types of demands that we can make on our elected officials, the people who do hold the people's power in their hands. Let us not forget that their power, anybody who has senator this or representative that, holds your power, and therefore they work for you. Yep. They work for us. And it's kind of been upside down, Agnew, as we saw traveling across this country, where you got elected officials acting like the voters owe them something. It is the other way around. And we can do something locally, regionally, statewide, and national level to ameliorate the suffering.
We absolutely can. First, I would say there are people out on the street, and it is my belief that it is because of those people that we began to see politicians doing and saying the things that they've been saying. So I always, every time I get the opportunity, I'm going to speak up in support of those people who are going out and lifting up the issues. But that's one specific role. Everybody's not going to be able to do that. But we're all moving. We're all moving towards something. What I'm going to do right now is read the demands that are up on the Movement for Black Lives website. You can find these at m4bl.org. Okay. We demand the rights of protesters be protected. That's pretty straightforward. We demand a divestment from the police and an investment in black communities. Schools, colleges, universities, all public institutions should cut ties with the police. So that we've seen that begin to happen, and I think we think that is a positive way forward for us to begin to cut out the interactions that institutions have with police. And immediate relief for our communities. That means medical, economic solutions, cash payments, rent cancellation, mortgage cancellation, etc. Community control. Most all police departments, in fact, all of them, operate not as upholders or enforcers of the law, but as people outside and above the law. Most police departments act like that, and most police officers, I said most police officers behave in that way. And so we believe that the community should have control and have over the police, over how safety works in their communities. We demand an end to the war on Black people, which we've alluded to. This country was set about in a war on Indigenous and on Black people. And so those are, we've already placed some of those things on the Facebook feed, so you can see some of those demands and a link to the website. How do you make white people understand by not speaking against racism, they are enabling it? SNT, I'm gonna pass that to you.
So that to me, I mean, it's by having this conversation that we having right now. I mean, that's the way to do it, to continue to talk about these issues. Certainly Ben Cohen, his op-ed lays it out very clearly. If you ain't doing anything about it, you consent to. And you don't have to have a special title, be of a certain economic class to understand that. It is all, so the police, law enforcement is just a reflection of us. And that's hard to admit. They are a microcosm of what is happening in this country. The whole notion of protect and serve was never meant for African Americans of our community or our community. They were trained to occupy our community, that we need to be chastised all the time. So that same psychology by which they were trained is the same psychology that we have as a country. So unless we purposefully deconstruct our construction, in other words, our natural inclination that was drilled into all of us, Black, white, or other, from birth, that Black people are somehow more criminal or less deserving of love. I mean, let me use what happened to young Tamir Rice as an example. Less than 2 seconds from the police rolling up on him. First of all, they broke protocol by rolling up hot like that, but that's another story. The officer wasn't even out the car good, Agnew, before he had his gun drawn and he shot a 12-year-old boy. When he was asked some of what was in his mind, he said he thought Tamir Rice was a 20-year-old man. Why do you bring this up, S&T? I bring this up because there is a psychological thing going on in this country that not only dehumanizes Black adults, but our babies, our children don't even get to be children. Look at the suspension rate, the school to prison pipeline. Black male children are suspended at higher rates. Our young Black girls are catching up with that because they don't get the same mercy, if you will, that other children get. Something's wrong with that.
No, they don't. They don't get a childhood. It comes out in a whole lot of different ways, right? The what you just talked about, how police officers and a whole host of other people age our young Black children. They sexualize our young Black women from a very young age. They think our young Black men are grown men and sexualize and fetishize and terrorize our children from a very young age. I mean, we could go down the list. I read an article many years ago, maybe 5 years ago, about the number of white people who speed up when they see a Black person in the intersection. For every little thing, and it is baked into the psyche. And I think unless white people not only do that work, but there are a great many white people who are on the side of liberation and who are fighting for it. It may not be as many as we need or as many as we hope, but there are some. But the crucial piece is whether you're talking to your cousin, whether you're talking to your uncle, your family. We go home. Most white people go home to family reunions or holidays with people who have these thoughts that are dangerous and turn into murderous tendencies. And if you hear many of these white terrorists, domestic terrorists who do this stuff, most of the time their parents say, I didn't even know. This is not the person I knew, right? And so we've got a duty to talk to our families and bring this thing home. You talked about it at the beginning of this thing. It's a lifestyle. We can't take off the organizer or the activist or the political person hat when we go to the house and just let all this stuff ride.
I agree, Agnew. I want to recommend 2 other organizations, blackfutureslab.org. Visit that. That is led by our sister, Alicia Garza, and they have a plan. They talk to thousands of Black people all across this country to lay out an agenda. And also Color of Change is being run by our brother, Rashad Robinson, doing an extraordinary job. So Movement for Black Lives, as Agnew has laid out, blackfutureslab.org, and Color of Change. And there are many, many others, but we're just naming some groups and some organizations.
I'm going to throw Dream Defenders out there.
Oh yeah, throw out the grave.
Dreamdefenders.org. You gotta do that.
Got to.
Dreamdefenders.org. If you go to the website, you'll find more information on what they're doing as well.
Yeah, so let's join in. So, Agnew, what are our closing remarks? I'm drawing my inspiration. I mean, I am inspired, but I'm enraged too. Just understand this, and as a Black woman in America, Black
Mm-hmm.
son, Black husband, husband is retired police officer. My son is in law enforcement right now. The pain that I feel on both sides of this is excruciating. I can't even really put it into words how I feel in this moment. In every moment, something like this happens. But The Fire Next Time, written by James Baldwin. If folks have
Mm-hmm.
not read that, it was a letter to his nephew. His nephew was named after him, and he really breaks it down. I do encourage you, and Agnew and I can recommend many books. Educate yourself. I mean, reading a book is not going to, but you have to educate yourself. That makes you better at being an
Right.
advocate for the change. The Fire Next Time, and what James Baldwin said to his nephew, he said, "This innocent country set you down in a ghetto in which, in fact, it intended that you should perish." Think about that. Wrap your mind around that. He went on to say
Mm-hmm.
that you were born
Mm-hmm.
where you were born and face the future that you faced because you are Black and for no other reason. That's truth.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Yep. This is yeah, so I think, we've got some closing questions here. I'm going to try to wrap up this last one about, this country, as you said, set Black people down to die, put us in projects, put us in slums, put us in ghettos, and disinvested totally from our lives. And the money and the labor and the wealth that we gave them from our labor, they extracted from us and stole from us. They then turned around and withheld that from us and left us in our communities. And that is the plan of this country. And that it will continue to run like that until we fight, until we continue to protest, until we continue to make ourselves ungovernable, until we elect people who are actually going to listen to us from the halls of those buildings, and until we educate ourselves about history and develop a plan for the future that isn't just reform, but really strikes at the root of all of these things. And this last question is about some of the separations between Latino, Asian, Black folks. That is all a part of the plan as well. And so I've heard a lot of people say, no, we got to get our community together first, and then we could do it. Listen, we as Black people, we've always had to do 2 things, 3 things, 4 things at once. Build the thing while we're driving the thing. And so we have a duty to work with people within our community, but we also have a duty to build coalitions and work with other communities and show them that we're actually bound up and wrapped up in this together. And so I guess that'll be my final word on this, that the way forward requires us to do many things at one time. There are many ways to get where we want to go. There are some ways that we do not get where we want to go. One of them is, this campaign zero stuff about, there are 8 ways that you can reduce your chances of getting murdered by 72%. That's not the way to go. We need to continue with radical demands that we put forward in building strategic coalitions with people of all races, all genders, across race, class, gender, and sexuality to build the movement that we need.
Amen. We need co-conspirators and allies, everybody. There is promise in this problem. So as heavy as this moment is, Dr. Agnew, and I want you to realize, and I sigh when I say it, I haven't sighed so much in such a long time, that as heavy as this moment is, we can, we will, and we must get through this. The question becomes the how. Because when is going to take care of itself, but it's the how. What happens on the other side of this? And all of us are obligated to do what we can, where we are, with what we have, to, in the words of Brother Mahatma Gandhi, be the change we want to see in the world. Please follow Drop Mic 2020 on Twitter. Drop the Mic right here on Facebook Live. Let's keep dropping some mics, whether we're talking about the military-industrial complex, which feeds into something what we're saying. I mean, Agnew, we didn't even talk about the 1994 crime bill that gave police department all of this military stuff and private prisons.
1033.
Listen, we'll talk another time, right? But we need folks dropping.
I'll be back.
Huh? Say what?
No, I said I'll be back.
You'll be back. Yes. So listen, everybody can drop a mic. You are all powerful. As President Nelson Mandela once said, we all powerful, baby. It's not that, but it's how you use what you have where you are to make the difference. Come on, y'all. Let's come on in and make the difference in our own way. Peace, love, happiness. Keep the faith, keep the fight. Agnew.
Thank you. I love you. Let's keep pushing.
Yes. Love.